councillors. Might make a start. So, welcome to everyone to tonight's councillor information briefing. Just for the benefit of everyone in the room and online, tonight it's not a formal decision-making forum, it's essentially an information session. So we'll be providing some information to councillors. Before we commence going through the material to present tonight, I'd just like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional owners of the Whyalla people and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Welcome Mayor and councillors for your first councillor briefing, one of many for the next 4 years in front of us. Just reminding everyone again in the room and online that we will be live streaming this information session and also recording it, and we'll post it onto our website within the next day or so for anyone who's not able to join us tonight. So tonight we're going to provide some summary information. Let's go to the next slide. So we're just going to briefly provide some information around our city, the council and the organisation. A high-level overview of roles and responsibilities for mayor, councillors, administration, and a strategic overview of the organisation. And I'll introduce the rest of the executive team shortly, and we'll provide some information to help inform you in your roles as the office of councillor and mayor. Next slide, please. Anyone who's been to one of the budget sessions in recent times would have seen this graphic or infographic. Just provides a quick snapshot of who we are and where we are. I think everyone in the room knows where we are. Probably one of the key things that we'd like to point out is that we're the second largest city outside of Metro Adelaide. If you leave Murray Bridge to one side, so you've got Mount Gambier in the south with about 28,000 people, and Whyalla to the north of Adelaide with about 22,000 people. We are a very proud city, and have made a significant contribution to state and national and regional interests over the years. And made a significant contribution. We're a bit of a city of two tales. At one end of the spectrum, we've got obviously a huge opportunity in front of us with some of the major state strategic projects, which we'll touch on shortly. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have a demographic that does have some socio-economic challenges. One of the key figures that is in the middle of that slide is what's called the CEFA index, which is a socio-economic indicator of financial advantage or disadvantage, published by the ABS. Our CEFA score is relatively low at 882, which, just to give a comparison, compares to the broader Peninsula region at large, which is 939. So the CEFA index looks at things like unemployment or underemployment, home ownership, private versus public travel, access to the internet and the like. So it's an indication of the socio-economic advantage or disadvantage in a location. Next slide, please. In terms of the council, like many councils, we provide many of the local government services. This infographic again is a busy one, but the purpose of it being busy is to confirm that we provide a significant number of services beyond what many other councils provide. So in addition to all of the traditional services, the roads, waste and rubbish that everyone's familiar with, we also own and operate a regional airport. We run a childcare centre. We have a cemetery and crematorium, accredited visitor information centre, and a couple of significant marine pieces of marine infrastructure, including our iconic Whyalla jetty. Later today or tonight, has all councillors got this document in front of them? So I'm just going to, we'll go through this document, Kathy will go through this document shortly, but on pages 9 and 10 of this induction handbook, we've got details about the Local Government Act, including the critical roles of council, functions of council, and some of the principles that need to be observed. And we'll do a little bit more of deep dive into some of those issues later tonight. In concluding this slide, council is tasked with a proactive role in making informed decisions on behalf of the community, developing initiatives, providing public services, and generally representing the interests of the community, which all sounds very easy, but very soon you'll know that there's a lot of divergent opinions and views, and it's always an interesting balancing act trying to work out what is good public value and in the best interest of the community at large. Next slide, please. Just reflecting some of our more recent history over the last few years, council has made some significant investment in the city with, as I mentioned before, the award-winning iconic Whyalla jetty, Bennett Oval upgrade, the upgrade of the airport terminal, the Foreshore Master Plan, and in more recent times, the hydrogen and renewable energy projects. Each of those projects, and particularly the last one, are important in terms of setting the context of where we are now, but probably more importantly, what the future looks like and your role as civic leaders in our community driving some of the improvements for our city going forward. Next slide. Just a high-level summary of our organisation. So the executive comprises myself and the 3 directors. Kristen Clark, who's our Director of Infrastructure, Jay Valentine, who's our Director of City Growth, and temporarily away from the table, Kathy Jarrett, who's our Director of Corporate Services. Kathy's just trying to organise to get Catherine online. I'm not sure why that's a little hiccup, but hopefully we can sort that out shortly. Jay, Kristen and Kathy will talk a little bit more about their respective roles, and you can see up on the chart there some of the functional responsibilities for each of the directors. Just going on to the next slide. So in terms of the roles and responsibilities, we're now going to provide some information at a high level about some of the roles and responsibilities of mayor, councillors, CEO, administration and the like. This is part of the council's mandatory training obligations, and we're really fortunate to have Andrea Malone with us. And Andrea, if you want to come forward in Kathy's absence. So Andrea Malone has been working with us now for 18 months, 2 years?
Nearly 2 years, yes, came for 6 months. But...
we're really fortunate. Andrea is actually due to retire from council at the end of next month, but having indicated retirement, has indicated that she will continue to work with our council on an as-needed basis post retirement to assist council through its mandatory training modules. The reason why that is significant and important to highlight is that Andrea, by profession, is a lawyer, having both a Bachelor of Laws with an honours from the Australian National University, Master of Laws from the University of New South Wales. In early professional life, worked with a number of state and Commonwealth agencies in New South Wales, and in the sort of second half of working career, has worked significantly in local government. 10 years as the Director of Legislation at the LGA of SA, 3 years consulting as a workplace investigator at Humane Legal, and is the last 2 years working with Whyalla City Council as our Manager of Legislation. So I'm going to hand over to Andrea, who's going to introduce some of what may be seen as the more technical and heavy part of tonight's session. So I'll hand over to you, Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Is this coming on? No. I've got a loud voice, so I'm probably going to.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction, Justin. And as for it being the most dry and less interesting part of the evening, I think you'll find the exact opposite, because I'm very passionate about the Local Government Act and I'm very happy to share it. I start at section 1. I don't think it'll take me too long tonight to get through it, but perhaps we'll leave that for another day. So I just wanted to start by introducing where local government sits in the tiers of government. And while the Commonwealth and the state both operate under the Constitution, local government operates enacted in the South Australian Parliament, and that's the Local Government Act, and it's a pretty important piece of legislation. So that means that council makes decisions only within its authority under that act, and it's based on the principles of administrative law, which is basically principles of good public administration. So it's a bit different from private industry and making decisions there. It is really about accountability, openness, and making decisions within the context of the legal parameters. So these principles include bringing an open mind to the issue at hand, putting aside any personal interests you might have, taking into account all the relevant considerations and not considering irrelevant ones, and acting in the best interests of the community at all times. So they're basic. I'm sure you all know them, but when you actually have to apply them, it's very important to keep them at the forefront of your mind. Council member duties, thank you, are set out in the Local Government Act. You'll have them in your handbook. You'll become more familiar with them. This will not be the first time that we touch on these issues, because they will keep coming up all the way through. They've had both positive duties and also restrictions on certain things that you can and can't do. So you will be hearing a lot more about this as the years pass. Council officers and staff, council members and staff are also public officers for the ICAC Act. So that brings with it responsibilities. You must report any reasonable suspicion you have of corrupt activity. That's bottom line. You're also encouraged to report suspected misconduct or maladministration, but we'll touch on some of these issues in more detail another time. The Local Government Act also contains specific integrity provisions, and these have been beefed up in recent amendments to the Act. So they are including the conflict of interest provisions, the disclosure of gifts requirements, confidentiality, the duty to act honestly and in good faith, and the duty not to make improper use of your position. Having those duties and responsibilities also brings with it some protections. So council members are protected from civil liability, provided that the liability arises from an honest act or omission. So honesty and good faith are the keys there to ensuring the protection from civil liability. So, for example, if you're out making comments in the community about issues and you say something that someone objects to and finds they think that's defamatory and they want to sue you, you will be covered so long as you've said it, whatever you've said, acting in good faith and with honesty. Councils have their own insurer, that's the Local Government Mutual Liability Scheme, and councils also required to take out an insurance policy which ensures that every member of council and a spouse or domestic partner or person accompanying the member. Oh, sorry. Anyone accompanying the member on their official duties, so at a conference or something like that, you are protected and insured against risks associated with the official discharge of those duties and functions. So, you act under those conditions. Okay, so the last few things I'm going to say are about the differentiation of roles and responsibilities between the council members themselves, i.e. the mayor and councillors. Just for the benefit of the terminology, council members include everybody, including the mayor. Councillors are everybody but the mayor, and the mayor is the mayor, also called presiding member. So that's just a bit of terminology that you'll hear, and it's not entirely interchangeable. So to start with the mayor, again, there's been changes to the Local Government Act. The mayor is now very specifically determined as the leader of the council, and provides leadership and guidance, promotes a positive and constructive working relationship, supports council members to understand their roles, and presides at meetings and is the principal spokesperson for the council. And we'll talk more about the mayor's role in speaking for council and your roles in representing your community and having your say in the community. For councillors, the Act sets out, in summary, you must act with integrity, ensure positive and constructive working relationships within council, support the mayor, develop skills in relation to the functions of the council, and keep under review the council's policy, resource allocation, expenditure, and the effectiveness of our service delivery. So there's been a big focus on ensuring positive and constructive working relationships with amendments to the Local Government Act. That's been based on, councils elsewhere who haven't always shown that, but Whyalla Council's got a very good track record in the last few years of being very constructive and working well. So we won't find that to be an issue. And that brings me finally to the role of the CEO and the council administration. So the CEO is responsible for the day-to-day administration of the council, and the CEO employs all of the employees in the council. The CEO himself is employed by you as the council members. The administration is responsible for implementing the strategic directions set by you as the council, and it provides reports to council on matters for decision with hopefully well analysed options and recommendations for implementing council decisions and providing service delivery. So council members must deal directly with the CEO and not with council employees, except insofar as the CEO makes that available to you. So all of those things will be covered in a lot more detail and with a bit more interactive involvement as time goes by. That's just a quick overview of some of the issues that arise for you immediately as you're being elected to the council. Thanks, Justin.
Just before Andrea moves away from the microphone, is there any initial questions? Today is very much just a synopsis of the information you need to know. We'll do some deep diving as early as Thursday night. But is there any questions that come to top of mind that anyone wants to ask at this point in time? No? All good? All right. Thank you, Andrea.
Thanks.
So just continuing on from where Andrea finished off, the role of the CEO and the administration is to obviously look after the day-to-day administration of the organisation, give effect to council's recommendations or resolutions, and obviously deliver very important services to our community. So the executive team, I'm really pleased, has been together now for 19, 20 months, 19, 20, what's the current number? Looking your direction, Jay, you're the last person. How long have you been doing this?
I think it's 18 or 19 months.
Yeah, around that. I'm just emphasising that because that's actually a big deal. This council traditionally, unfortunately, has had history of senior executive being sort of turning over reasonably quickly. So the fact that we've had the same executive group on deck now for close to 2 years is, I think, very important for the continuity and success of the organisation. Just next slide. We're now going to talk through effectively each of our portfolios. I'll briefly touch on projects of the Office of the CEO. So within my office, I have the 3 direct reports being the directors, Cheryl Armstrong, who looks after both myself and the Mayor in terms of executive assistants for the Office of the Mayor and Office of the CEO, and Sean Kelly, who I'm sure all of you would have met already. Sean looks after our comms and public relations group. So next slide. So some of the key focus areas for the Office of the CEO has been around living and breathing the organisation's values. So the values are in the top right hand side there. Very simple statements, but very powerful statements. And I think the organisation has made significant steps forward over the last couple of years in terms of the organisational culture. There is a term that I often use, which is that leadership and culture starts at the top, and the tone at the top is really important, because if and you often hear me talking about the interdependency between the elected member group and the executive. As elected members, you can't be successful out in the community with the ratepayers in the community that you represent if the organisation underperforms or underdelivers, and certainly doesn't deliver on council's policy intent and the recommendations or resolutions of council. So you're very obviously dependent in the eyes of the community on how we as an administration function. And the inverse of that is that as administration, we can only be effective if you as councillors set good strategic direction, clear policy, clear priorities, so that we then have the ability to put the right resources and attention into the right areas. So a couple of images there. The bottom one is the most recent photo. That was only last week. That was a farewell for one of our depot employees. And as you can see, quite a large number of people there with lots of smiley faces. So that is actually a good reflection of the current positivity within the workforce. I think the top left hand might be a brain feed session, or
Brain feed session on the relocation.
Yeah, so we have internally what we call brain feed sessions, which is now once a month, where it's sort of a bit like the TED Talk, but we have speakers come in and talk about something that's topical or broaden the awareness and appreciation of the staff. So strong focus on our culture, the organisation, economic development sort of sits between myself and Jade. As the CEO, many of the interactions with external parties, whether it's state, federal government, private sector investors, I have a role to play in supporting Jade with the economic development function, and obviously a lot of focus and attention on advocacy on behalf of our city, particularly with the state and federal government. Next slide. There's been a lot of positivity around the state strategic projects over the last couple of years. So with the increasing focus on hydrogen and renewable energy, we have the 3 state significant projects. Again, in the councillor's handbook, there's a high-level summary, but we will be having the lead agencies for each of those 3 projects come and present to council and brief council where each of those projects are very shortly. Each of those projects at present are very much focused on what I call the hard infrastructure. So Port Knife Hydrogen Hub, the hydrogen jobs plan, which is a power station, together with an electrolyser and storage facility, and the Northern Water Supply Project, which is a major desalination plant, all proposed for our local government area, all focused on hard infrastructure. In recent times, we've been advocating to both the federal and state government, and to a lesser extent the private sector, around the need for a similar investment in the soft infrastructures to support that. So up on the slide, there's two graphics there. One's our economic development strategy, which council adopted earlier this year, and what we call the precinct partnership document, and we'll share that with all councillors. The precinct partnership document is around trying to get a joined up approach with the federal and state government to co-design, co-create and co-fund the investment in our city, probably over the next 5 to 10 years, to support our city to be successful, because these major projects won't be successful if the city's not, and again, vice versa. So we know that the livability and amenity, just next slide please, the livability and amenity of our city is very important in being able to attract the thousands of people that will be needed during the construction phase for each of those projects. Each one of those 3 projects has got thousands of jobs required during the construction phase, and that's before we then talk about Coltana Army training facility, hotel developments, housing developments at scale and the like. So significant pipeline of projects coming into our city. So we're actually in a really good place and poised to maximise the benefit of those that investment. You might reflect on what's before us. Anyone who went to Newcastle 10 or 15 years ago and been in more recent times will see that Newcastle is completely transformed. Newcastle's got a lot of very similar attributes to Whyalla, given its location vis-a-vis Sydney, and also its port focus on steel and iron ore exports. So I think we can potentially learn a lot from Newcastle. So where there has been a transformation in Newcastle over recent years, the question is, what does our future look like? And one of the challenges that we have as a council is that our current long-term financial plan shows that we're unsustainable, i.e. we're not, our revenue's not eating expenditure every year for the next 10 years. However, the council, in adopting the 2022-23 annual business plan and budget, made a deliberate decision not to look at the 2 key levers before council, that is running or looking at an operating deficit. The 2 levers is either to significantly increase rates or significantly start to cut or reduce services and cut costs. At a time in Whyalla's evolution, the view of the council was that now's not the time to pull significantly either of those 2 levers, noting the step change in investment that we believe will come online within the next 10 years. And you get a briefing from the state government. Some of that investment is potentially about to start coming online now. So the hydrogen power station will be going out to the private sector. So Office of Hydrogen Power will be going out to do an international call for development partners at the beginning of next month, and are looking to build the power station within the next couple of years. So we're not talking 5, 8, 10 years away. Similarly, the 7 companies that have been engaged by the state government with Port for Nyphon, they're on the ground just about now every second week, and looking to start their investment sooner rather than later. So again, just emphasise thousands of people coming into our city, and so a really great opportunity to lead with that, particularly with the state and federal government when it comes to housing. Just go on to the next slide. So why is there a big focus on those projects and that investment? The short version is that it gives us the foundation for a healthy discussion with the federal and state government and the private sector around improving the livability and amenity of our city. What we don't want is thousands of people flying in, flying out, or driving in, driving out, and not calling Whyalla home. We do need to get the urban renewal of our city and the services and facilities and lifestyle offering that will attract the skilled workforce of the future. And we are competing not only with other states, but internationally for the limited skilled workforce that exists. So that precinct partnership is then an important document in terms of how do we have that joint up conversation. That little quote on the right-hand side is put up there deliberately. It is always a challenge for councillors, and I say this respectfully and honestly. You'll see and hear lots of views from different individuals. One of the greatest challenges for councillors is to think like a community, not like an individual. So you'll have some people that will say, well, I don't have kids that go to the childcare service, so why should I contribute rates for a childcare service? I don't use the airport, so why do I contribute rates to pay for an airport? The challenge is that, back to, as Andrew mentioned, we need to work out what is good public value and what is best in terms of the public interest. And it is always a challenging role to get that balance right. With that, I'm going to now hand over to Jade, who's going to talk about the city growth portfolio.
Good evening, everyone. Familiar faces. Some of my star in video. We practically kicked the night off with that video. If I was to describe the City Growth Directorate, I would say it's 3 words: ideas, movement, and passion. And so if you identify with any of those 3 words, I think we'll have a great interaction over your term. City Growth is a really vibrant, interesting directorate for one reason. It combines community development with economic development. We're sitting over the 2 spheres and looking at them simultaneously, and that's pretty powerful and quite rare in a local government space. Often those business units will be separated, but here they sit under the one directorate. So that's what attracted me to the position and what we can deliver by putting those 2, because often they're siloed and they need to talk to each other. So I'm have a breadth that's, I'm not going to lie, it's a challenge. In the room is Jodie Ferroni, my Senior Manager for City Development.
Just everyone know Jodie.
She's all UK. My manager of the airport sends his apologies. I couldn't be here this evening. He's had a lot of overtime lately and really needed some family time this evening, and then I have vacancies in the other 2 manager positions. So there's a bit of pressure in terms of being limited in our resources. That's not the slide I was expecting. Next slide.
That didn't come through. That's what you sent through.
Oh, okay. That's okay. It's important. Just because I want to start with the community, that's where city growth always starts in terms of our decision making. We take the local assets, both built and human, and that's what we look at first and foremost. And what are those in Whyalla? And what do they mean? And what's their past? And where are they at now? And how do we culture them to move forward? So it's not about just creating the new. It's about finding what's here, existing, finding that energy and the guts of it and renewing it, because Whyalla has one incredible story, and if we don't tap into that story in the first instance, then most of the work that we try and introduce will be resisted in the community. So we try and find that in the start. Pictures I chose, wonderful jetty, we've all heard about it, we all know about it, it's wonderful, but how do we activate it? How do you use our jetty and it give you something back and tell you something about Whyalla? So we're really working in that space. We've got a lot of work to do there. So it's just not an engineering structure. It's meaningful. It gives you something back. Tandera, I love it. It's my favourite. It's falling apart, but I love it. and the people inside and what they do and their creativeness. We need to expand and explore and get them out there. And it's our community activities and events that really are our front facing. Might not make it to the front page of the Advertiser or the headlines all the time, but that's the first place we start. And I just wanted to emphasise that. And then we'll skip to the apologies. No, it's my fault, obviously. So I selected these two because within City Growth we have City Development, which looks at the heritage. And we've got some magnificent architecture and buildings that can really be rejuvenated to do much more for this community and also to attract people that may want to visit. We have an asset being our cuttlefish that really has put us on the map. If you saw the ABC underwater live show, I mean, we went on the map the following week. We were inundated with people wanting 4- and 5-star accommodation and to book for next season, and we'd never heard of this, and this is amazing. And we were underprepared. We don't have that accommodation. We don't have those facilities, but we got onto the national platform. So we have a lot of work to do in that space and protecting Stony Point and making sure that the 4,000 or so people that attended this season don't impact on the cuttlefish or the local surrounds. That sits in City Growth as well. And we had a new business established there this year. So there's the economic development. But as I said, if the environment and the social aren't working, it's not going to work ultimately. And then we've worked really hard on people's first impressions of Whyalla, not just from a visitor perspective, but if you look after the 8 and the 80-year-olds in your community, you tend to nail it. And I've seen that over many years working in the public service. And our entrant statements, how do we want to present ourselves to our community, make them feel proud? And hopefully many of you got to attend the air show, which really showcased what we've done to the airport. And for those people in Whyalla who will never ever pass through those doors to hop on a plane and travel, it's very important to show them and for them to feel equally as proud as those who can afford to have air travel. Building on those assets enables us to be really creative and try new things. The air show was not a new thing and that we have done it before, but our scale and the way we approached it this time around really blew us all out the water. And it was a fantastic gathering of all facets of the Whyalla community coming together in the one space at the one time to share that collective energy. When we get that stuff right, when our buildings are contemporary and modern and accessible to all, that's when we can protect all those other aspects and be open to the economic development approaches that are coming thick and fast. They're many and varied, and we need to be prepared for them as they come along. And you would have seen plenty of discussion in the media about our pods and what we did. It really originated from a wicked issue that faces Whyalla and will face you very much in your term, which is our old building stock that aren't really fit for purpose anymore, that some of them aren't fit for human interaction. And the surf life-saving build and redevelopment of that building is a case in point. And we knew, obviously, and you would have all experienced, the closure of the former beach cafe meant that having a cafe available whilst that building was redeveloped and demolished and renewed was important. We found out that the former Adelaide 500 had event stock. This was before the current government renewed it, and we sourced the second-hand pods to activate spaces. We'd also just gone out to the community and engaged harder than we'd ever engaged before on the foreshore master plan. That generates an expectation. There needs to be forward movement for those 2,500 people that engaged with us on that co-design. The pods activated immediately a couple of spaces on the foreshore. It showed that movement, that energy I mentioned in the first instance. My favourite stories relating to the pods are the artists that it's activated, the local business person who is now stocking the visitor centre with new stock, the people that are coming out of the woodwork wanting to create and add to the visitor pod, and the cafe, watching that develop. I got to go in there this morning and they were busting their chops to get it open by the 28th. And they had beach umbrellas in there ready. They had the buckets and spades. They had the ice cream. And it was very exciting, and it's been a long haul. And for those of you that were here previous term, you know how long a haul it's been. So, yeah.
So you can actually get buckets of ice cream, can you?
No. You certainly could, and I would. And the library pod has activated that beautiful artwork. And when we get that up and running, they've really energised. More people are coming through the visitor pod and spending more money than we've ever seen in our visitor tourism. It's just really activated the space. And then hopefully during your term, or if you stay on for another term, we get to decide where we put them next, because that's why we got them. We can pick them up and shift them, and we can take them to Norton Park, or we could go out to Stony Point and we can reinvigorate the spaces, or we might love them where they are. That's the reason we did it. Any questions?
I do have a question. Just on the pod, so how much, that sounds like a really cool story, and I believe it, but I didn't know about that, and maybe I've probably missed a lot of the communications that have come through. But how do we engage, or how has that been engaged with the community about that story that you just shared? Because that sounds great, but I didn't know about it.
And we're in our media releases and our Facebook page, and we had a couple of, I think it was the Advertiser once covered us, Sean. Yeah. What more to the point, we've been waiting for the cafe to get ready to open, because one of the laser cutters and fabricators who built the pods is a Whyalla born and bred, and it was the most exciting day when he works in Tonsley in the Innovation Hub in Adelaide, when he realised he was working on Whyalla projects. And so he asked, he's quite skilled, he asked to do the Unearthed logo and in the laser cut of the visitor pod. And his mum still resides here. She's in her 80s. We're hoping to get her to be the first one to have a coffee in there when we launch. So where I was going with that is we've got a lot more work to do on communicating them. We've got Glam Adelaide waiting to run and Hello SA waiting to run some stories on the visitor pod. We're scheduled for that. So there's more to come on those spaces too. But yeah.
Good. All right. Thank you. And now, so Kristen.
Thank you. Welcome back, members. So infrastructure essentially breaks down into three different areas. On the left, we have the Manager Capital Works Delivery, and we have Tim Bailey acting in that at the moment. Tim is in the back of the room. Thanks, Tim. So, I mean, that's probably the easiest one for elected members to understand. It's delivering the capital projects, which tend to be the larger items that council work on. The next one is manager operations. So that role, amongst other things, looks after our depot. Our depot is made up of two different sides. We have the open spaces team who look after the parks and gardens, who look after weed spray, and also some of our rubbish pickup. We also have our civil team, which looks after sealed and unsealed roads. And they also have a concrete program that they deliver each year, whether that's repairing footpaths or doing curb and gutter before we lay down bitumen and do stormwater. So we have about 45 people up at the depot. On the far right, we have Robin Noddle, who's an apology tonight. She's the manager of projects and assets. So she does a lot of the asset planning for council's assets. So whether it's roads, irrigation, buildings, our fleet. So it's just planning for the renewal of all of those things, and then having a plan in place to deliver what the renewal looks like, or sometimes we go with a completely new item. So for some playgrounds, for instance, we might do renewal, which is where we might turn over half of that playground, or we might look to completely remove all of the items that are in a playground and replace it with completely new items. Part of that role also looks after facilities, and facilities ties into the community in terms of the buildings that council provide. And I'll talk about that a bit more in the final slide that I have, and that also dovetails into the pod story that Jay's told, and also it leads to why some of the communications haven't come forward yet. It's been part of the journey for the last 12 months, with council looking at its facilities and reviewing what we're able to provide the public. Next slide, please. Top left, we have our open spaces team there. That looks to be some of the new work we're doing at Wilson Park. So we had the team down there doing some new concrete work and also laying some new grass. So that's our depot team in action. In the top right, for instance, trees, we do have a green Whyalla team that looks at green Whyalla. Probably 4 or 5 years ago, we were planting around 200 trees a year. At the moment, we're up to around 700 trees a year. And the challenge is to try to get to 1,000 or more. Does anyone know what the biggest challenge is with planting trees? Yeah, so
Pulling them out of the ground.
people pulling them out of the ground, we have had that. They do it by hand. They also do it by winch down at the foreshore, which is disappointing. But the biggest challenge we have is actually watering trees. So for all of the trees that we put in, we do make a commitment that we will water each tree for 3 years. And after that, we look for them to be self-established and to be able to look after themselves. So for every tree we plant, we need to be planning for how we water that tree. For some of our medium strips that are along our main roads, we do have irrigation. We can use potable water from SA Water, and in a lot of places we can also use recycled water from SA Water. It's a cheaper form of water, it's another form of recycling. The trouble we have though is when we try to get into our back streets, and that's where we don't have irrigation and then we need to use a water truck. We do have access to free water in some of the stormwater that we catch, but the offshoot of that is a water truck isn't an efficient way to be delivering water as such. So we are looking as part of that planning in terms of how can we run more irrigation through our city, whether it's to use stormwater, recycled water or potable water where we need it. In the bottom left, we have one of our shared trails. So Whyalla Council has been doing a very good job, I think, of installing shared trails throughout our city, predominantly joining points of interest, whether it's the beach, the wetlands, westlands, libraries, out to one stop. We have been doing about 1 kilometre a year. We've been pretty successful each year in that we're able to get 50% of the funding as provided through some grants. We are looking to step that up significantly, but of course that comes at the expense of other projects or ideas. So one of the items we'll be looking to put in front of the elected members is shared trail is something else that we want to look at and lift our investment. We're also getting towards the end of a trail master plan, which we'll be looking to bring to council. And that'll also cover things like where do locals like to walk, and that doesn't need to be a shared trail. It could be a goat track or a footpath, or where tourists like to go, and that could be a mixed sort of track. So it could be concrete, bitumen, or hardcore and dirt, if you like. So we have been identifying where some of those ideas are, and again, we'll be looking to bring that to council for decision in terms of what paths we look to progress over the next few years. In the bottom right, we have that was the Bennett Oval cricket nets, which were opened earlier this year. So we do provide some sporting facilities in conjunction with some of the other sporting groups. There. Sure. Top right, it's the opposite of planting trees. We do have to remove trees, unfortunately. So, look, the removal of trees is an important council job. We have over 30,000 trees in our database, and we do a risk assessment of all of those trees. As part of that, we look at the age of the tree, the condition of the tree, and if it can be saved. Sometimes some trimming can help us keep a tree. Other times we do need to look at removing the tree. We have had some significant wind events recently. Over the weekend just gone, we have had some trees fail. And it's interesting talking to the tree crew, because sometimes it's just a product of the event. Other times it is a tree failing. And what we are seeing now at this end of our program is that quite often it just comes down to significant weather events. Last weekend and the weekend before, it was quite windy as well, up around the 80, 90 kilometre an hour mark. And we didn't have any trees come over during those events. So that was giving us some confidence that the trees that we've been removing would have normally fallen over in a high wind event. So that gives us some confidence that we're on the tree removal. Bottom left, our depot crew is looking to do more than just provide normal day-to-day operational services. They are looking to move into smaller capital works type projects that we might have outsourced in the past. So some of the greening of our playground areas and community areas they're looking to do, as well as the concreting and providing shade where they can. Bottom right is a picture from the year just finished, the financial year just finished. Council had found itself in a position where road maintenance is something that had really fallen away, and we were 12 to 15 years behind in terms of our road maintenance. So we, the previous council made a pretty solid commitment to improving our road networks, which was really just around reselling our roads. We spent $15 million over 3 years catching up that deficit. So while we hadn't been looking after the roads before that, certainly the last 3 years has been a huge commitment to improving our road surfaces. And one of the focuses going forward is on the unsealed road network. So we have mainly been focusing on sealed roads. Going forward, we're looking to do a lot more work with our unsealed roads as well. Going forward, our roads budget is down around that $800,000 or $900,000 a year mark instead of the $5 million. So that's just a step down in scale now that we've got our road network under control. Thanks, Michelle. So here we've got, I guess we've got the rec centre, we've got the White Tech building and the girl guides, all of the scalpel there. So as Jade said, buildings in Whyalla are really providing us with one of the biggest challenges that we have. These buildings are up there just because they're sort of known around town, and they're good examples to point to. But you know, a lot of our building stock is getting quite old. We have at least 45 different buildings that council maintain. A lot of them are getting towards end of life. The difficulty we're going to have is how do we manage that amount of buildings? Are we going to look pouring a lot of money into old buildings and try to sustain them for years to come? Or are we going to look to move some community groups out, potentially into pods, while we either renovate buildings or build new places for community groups to meet, so that we then can transition community groups back in? We really are at the pointy end in terms of managing our buildings around. We are starting to see buildings fail, and we'd rather be on top of how we maintain that building or where that community group looks to work out of before the buildings fail. So there will be a lot of decisions around buildings coming up. As well as our own 45 buildings that we maintain and lease out to community groups. We also have over 45 buildings that are on council land that aren't owned by council. And so there's another group of buildings that are generally quite old. They don't necessarily belong to council, but being on our land, we are then part of their story in terms of how we maintain them and how we work with those community groups going forward. So the pods are a great first step in terms of us having some new buildings that we're able to use and transition some groups in even temporarily, while we look at how we maintain the buildings going forward. So that's some work that's really only just come to a point in time where the previous council executive had got some data in front of it, and part of that was setting ourselves up for this council so that the communication can start with the community as a whole. It's not just going to be a pod story, it's going to be all of our buildings and where is Whyalla at the moment in terms of its history with buildings and what do those decisions look like going forward. Tandera is going to be one that's not in great condition. We've also got the rec centre up there, which is another building that still gets used daily, and we are looking to spend $750,000 on it in the current year. But that's really just fixing up some of the issues that the building has. It's not adding services, it's really just helping us sustain the services that are there. But again, there'll be another one that comes up. That is all on that slide. Thank you, Michelle. Happy to take any questions.
I've got one. Need to turn this on. During the election campaign, one candidate mentioned several times about water leakage at the swimming pool, the rec centre. How much we actually losing there a day or a week?
There was a point in time, I'm going to guess it was 2 years ago, we were losing 60,000 litres a day, which was a lot of water. We got it down to 4,000 litres a day. We relined the pool and the pools. the three pools are all connected essentially through one water system. It has gone up from 4,000 litres a day, but I think it's still under 10. And one of the questions we are trying to determine is it leaking, is it evaporating, or is it being lost in the system somewhere? So while it has gone up from the low of, I'll call it 4,000 a day, it's not alarmingly so. But it is an ongoing battle that we have in terms of trying to determine the water usage of the pool.
Do you want to just mention the age of the building?
Yes, so the direct centre on the spot, now, it might have been built in the 70s. 71 was it? I was thinking 74, 71. So it's quite an old building. It's undergone a couple of refurbishments. Structurally, it's okay. The outside shell of the building is fine. One of the problems that we have, or the biggest problem that we have, is with the three pools. They're all on the one water system. So if you had a water particle, it could end up in, I'll call it the spa, the kids' pool, the play pool, or the main swimming pool. But it all runs through the same filters and the same pumps. One of the problems that we have with that is the spa as a single usage has quite high requirements. The water, for instance, has to turn over every half an hour in a spa, and it has to be kept at a particular temperature, and the requirements around treating the water with chemicals is quite high. Our problem is, instead of working with, I'll make up a number, 10,000 litres and try to keep that in the spa at the right spec, all of our system is one, and so we've got 1 million litres of water that we have to maintain at the highest level, and it's then being siphoned through all the other pools. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Kristen. I'm sure there's lots of questions, but tonight we'll try to keep it at a reasonably high level. Now I'll hand over to Kathy Jarrett.
Thank you, Justin, and welcome members, and congratulations on your election. I know that as an organisation we are looking fabulously excited to working with you, and the next 4 years. I've said to many of you, and we're on a cusp, is my belief in terms of the city and this organisation as well. So I think there's extraordinary opportunity, and we welcome you, and we look really forward to working with you. Corporate is all of the usual suspects, but how I like to view it, and certainly I know that the team in corporate view it the same way, is that we're about setting the organisation up for success, so that people like Jade and Kristen and Justin can, from an outward focus perspective, to deliver public value. So we're largely in behind the scenes, making sure that the organisation is set up with the systems and the processes that allows good decision making to occur, both at an administrative level and also for you as an elected body. Up there you can see that we have 5 areas within corporate. People and culture, our manager Sue King, who is here tonight. Sue leads all of our effort around culture, around organisational development, around human resource advisory, and around work health and safety. One of the things, work health safety is such a critical aspect of any organisation's operations, and when you're working in a council, there are many risks and many opportunities, and the team do a fabulous job in work health safety. Andrew Malone, who you've met before managing legislation. Unfortunately, she will be retiring at the end of next month, but she has left a legacy here for us in terms of the knowledge that she's imparted, and also she will stay in touch with us as an organisation over the next 12 months or so to ensure that we can keep working that through. Governance is an area that is really and hugely broad. Irene Adair, who's here, is our Manager Governance. Irene was a former elected member, and so she understands both sides of the fence, which is fabulous skills and knowledge to have. Governance is all things around policy, around risk management, around insurances, around emergency management, and it's much of it is the foundation that sets the organisation up for success and holds it up. Basically, the policies that come to council provide the guidance for how decisions are to be made and provide the guidance for how the administration then operates. We also have internal policies, of course, to ensure that behaviours and actions are in alignment with the objectives of the council. Regulatory services is one of the outward focused services in the corporate portfolio, which deals with animal management and parking, environmental health, etc. So again, it's about compliance, but we like to turn compliance around into an educative role so that we don't actually need to be complying and administering compliance or expiation notices of the like. We prefer to take an educative approach out there in the community. But of course, there is the expiation approach that we can take as well. Manager Finance, Grant Jennings. Grant is here as well. So Grant looks after all of our finances, and I've got to say that the advice that he provides into council and into the administration is highly regarded across the local government sector. So we are very, very blessed in terms of his skill sets that he brings. And he looks after our strategic financial management, rates, payroll and procurement. And of course, without services like payroll, for example, whilst we're all getting paid on a fortnightly basis, if we weren't getting paid, the organisation would very quickly fall over. So these are the sorts of services that are key to setting it up for success. And then we have our information and knowledge management. The manager role there is vacant, but tonight here is David Poignant, who is our coordinator of information technology, and he keeps us running. Without IT happening, again, we wouldn't be able to deliver the services. So corporate services, whilst it's back of office, without corporate services, Jane and Kristen and Justin will be able to do their services. So we're pretty forward. Excellent, thanks. Some of the things that we've been doing or achieving over the last year or two, animal management plan and public health plan are two key strategic documents that council needs to have in accordance with different pieces of legislation. Those two plans have been comprehensively reviewed, gone out to public consultation on, and have now been adopted by council. We've received feedback from SA Health that the public health plan has been accepted, and we've had good feedback on that, as well as the animal management plan from the Dog and Cat Management Board. Top right hand corner are pictures of this building from a couple of years ago. Many of you would be aware that we have got significant issues with this building in terms of its state of repair. We will be and are currently in the throes of a relocation project, and we will be relocating to the Edward John Eyre High School within the next 3 months. I would like to think that it will be within that time frame. So we've been working on that for the last couple of years in understanding what the state of disrepair of this building is, whether or not we could actually fix it to stay in here, or whether we needed to move. And the decision has been taken by the previous council that we do need to relocate on a temporary basis, whilst we investigate in much more detail as to a permanent location for the council. Middle left there are 3 trainees, picture of 3 trainees. We've been doing a significant program around trainees here in this organisation. There's been 5 in total over the last few months, and we're continuing that program. And really great feedback coming from the trainees in terms of their experience that they've had here. No surprises to anybody in this room that we've got an ageing workforce across local government in South Australia, and we're no orphan in that space. So it's critical that we start to get trainees in and we refresh our workforce and build skills from within. Local government reform has been a key focus. We, this last 12 months, introduced an electronic payroll system that will start to lead to more mobile workforce as we build that system. And the graphic in the middle there is around the body of work that we do around the annual business plan and budget process and the significant consultation that we do there. There's many, many more things that I could have put up on this slide as to achievements of the team over the last 12 months, but there's only just so much that you can do. Thanks, Michelle. And this is, you know, in terms of looking forward, and again, it's just a very brief snapshot on a couple of little things. The bottom graphic is around the relocation. We've done quite a significant piece of engagement within the organisation. Shifting the building, shifting offices from here to the Whyalla High School is a huge piece in culture. It's going to mean a huge change in working conditions for staff, and when staff have been here for 20, 30 years, you know, it's a massive culture shift in order to actually shift from here into a new location. It will be open space working, whereas here we've got much more contained within offices. We've had a significant engagement program across the organisation. Everybody has been, you know, delivering fabulous ideas as to how we can go about moving the organisation. And got to say, there is a buzz, you know, there is an excitement and a buzz in terms of the move from this building into the Whyalla High School. The top left there is coming back to the trainees. The people and culture team have worked and developed a career pathways program. I'm not sort of going, you won't be able to read the detail in there, but the career pathways program is about developing career pathways within this organisation, bringing trainees into the organisation, looking at the whole of the recruitment cycle. How do we bring new people into the organisation and start actually refreshing and bringing young people in? The top right one, I've put that there. That's your program for the next 4 years in terms of strategic planning and so on. And I've got to say that it's going to be pretty intense for you, but it'll be a lot of fun as well. It's about how do we actually seize the day and really take this council into the future that we all know that is going to be there. Next one, thanks. And so what I wanted to touch on is you've all got this in front of you. This is your induction handbook, and this is a handbook that I have to say thank you to Lisette and to Michelle and to every other staff member in this room who have made an amazing contribution to this document. This is the first time this council has had such a document. What it does for you, and I really do implore you to not just skim it, but read it when you have spare moments in your day. It does set out much of the requirements of the legislation in the first part, but in easily digestible bits. So it's not reading the Local Government Act, but it will actually set out some of the key information that you need to know. The second tab is the program report. So if you just flick to that, this second tab is about 3 pages, and it's your program up until March next year. This program encompasses professional development for the elected members that is very much aligned with the mandatory training standards that you're required to complete over the first 12 months of the council. We've taken an approach with the mandatory training standards that we want it to be applied learning. So we're scheduling the training standards at times when you're starting your strategic planning program, and so it will be applied learning as we go through. Other tabs in here set out the actual mandatory training standards, the behavioural standards for council members, etc., etc. I'm not going to go through it in detail at the moment, but I will also just point out to you that in this booklet are a series of detailed briefings, and these briefings will take you through a snapshot of the current issues that that this organisation is dealing with. As Justin mentioned, it talks about the 3 primary projects in hydrogen and renewable energy. It will talk about the goals, it talks about community services, it talks about the capital works program, it talks about systems modernisation, and it talks about this building. So these briefing statements will give you some snapshot information in terms of the organisation and where it's at. So very much implore this document to you if you scan it. Any questions that you might have, please feel free to, first of all, contact Justin and he'll point you in the right direction as to where to go for some additional information. Probably the last thing that I'll say, or two last things that I'll say, we do have a training session scheduled for Thursday night, and also part of tonight's briefing session are going towards your mandatory training requirements. So the briefing elements that Andrea mentioned, plus also this very high level overview of the strategic topics, will all go towards your mandatory training requirements. Thursday night session will go to the mandatory training requirements. So we need to know if you're going to be able to be in attendance, because if you can't be in attendance, we will need to make some other arrangements. I'll leave it at that in that context. The last thing is we have got laptops for you all, and as part of provisioning you with the equipment that you need in order to do your jobs. I have a booking sheet here whereby I need to sit down with you, and I can get times tonight as to when you could come in and spend half an hour to an hour with our IT team, getting your usernames, passwords, and a very quick overview into getting into the system. The Thursday night training session will also provide training on tech issues. We have an electronic distribution of all council papers, etc., and called the Local Government Hub, so we need to train you on how to use that. This whole document and more is on that hub, so you don't have to necessarily read this in hard copy form. It is all available electronically as well. So I've got a booking sheet for Cheryl's got a booking sheet. Yeah, no, yes, we've got a booking sheet here. So if I can ask before you leave tonight, come and put your name on that booking sheet, and we can take it from there. Any questions? Yeah, there's a second booking sheet, sorry, for formal photos during the period of 6th to the 9th of December. So again, we'll do a booking sheet and accommodate your working needs and how you might be available to attend.
Okay. Any questions? Any questions for Kathy? All right. Well, we've been going for about an hour and a quarter, so I reckon that might be enough for tonight. We deliberately didn't want to overwhelm you with too much information, but we wanted to at least give you a bit of a taster of some of the information that's before you. Thursday night, we'll get into some more detailed information around the training requirements and meeting procedures and the like to set you up. So we've got the first formal council meeting on Monday the 28th, and so a week today. And so we'll get the agenda papers out to you probably on Thursday-ish.
Yeah. Not Wednesday.
Possibly as early as Wednesday. The first agenda will cover a number of items that we're obliged to deal with at the first meeting of council. We'll use part of the session on Thursday night just to confirm what's on the agenda, and you'll have the papers then, but also do a mock meeting so that you can understand meeting procedures and the formalities of council. So for tonight, last call, is there any other questions that any councillors want to raise today? No, there's probably lots and lots of questions in your mind. We'll close up now then the formalities of tonight's councillor briefing. I'll get Lisette to stop recording in shortly, but can I say to councillors, if you want to have a chat with any of the staff members here off the back of this session, please feel free to start firing questions away. And otherwise, we'll see you all collectively on Thursday, and hopefully, happy David will see you over the next hour or so to get your computers into your hand and plugged in and online for your role as councillor. So thank you, and with that, I'll close tonight's meeting. Thanks.